The internet lit up like wildfire the moment the news broke. Dr. Umar Johnson, the self-proclaimed prince of Pan-Africanism, the man who spent over a decade begging for donations to build his so-called school, was no longer just under scrutiny. According to reports, the feds had officially stepped in, filing RICO charges, freezing accounts, and calling into question every dollar the man ever raised in the name of Frederick Douglass and Marcus Garvey. And while the community sat in shock, trying to process how deep this went, one voice cut through the noise. Spiderlock, the rapper and commentator who has never been afraid to call things as they are, stepped forward and delivered his raw reaction. And when Spiderlock reacts, you already know the culture listens. Because let's be honest, this isn't just about donations or a building sitting empty in Delaware. This is about trust. This is about a man who claimed to stand as the last line of defense for Black children against systemic oppression. Now accused of turning that very community into his personal ATM, Dr. Umar Johnson once stood on stages, calling himself unapologetically African, vowing that the bells of his academy would ring one day. But now, those same bells are being drowned out by the sound of the feds tightening their grip. The very receipts he waved around to prove his legitimacy are now the receipts investigators say prove his fraud. What makes this even more explosive is how many times the warning signs were ignored. For years, supporters complained about delay after delay. The school was almost ready, until it was vandalized. Then it was about to open, until suddenly the accounts were frozen. Over and over, excuses piled up, but no classrooms ever filled with children. Yet donations kept coming. People sacrificed paychecks, mothers gave from their savings, fathers donated in faith. And every single time Dr. Umar Johnson went live on Instagram, it was the same routine. Thank you, Sister Avanti, for that $10 on the Cash App. Next time make it $20. He'd smile. He'd repeat his slogans. He promised that change was coming. But according to prosecutors, all along he was building not a school, but a scheme. And here's where it stings the most. This wasn't just some random grifter off the corner. This was a man who wore titles, who wrote books, who filled auditoriums with speeches about liberation. Spiderlock nailed it in his reaction when he said the part that hurts isn't the charges themselves, it's how deeply the betrayal cuts. Imagine believing in someone for over a decade, only to find out the federal government now has a case that could put him away for decades. Imagine donating your last $50 for a dream that prosecutors say was never meant to happen. But it gets worse. Reports surfaced that the feds froze over $1 million across multiple accounts, tracing PayPal, Cash App, GoFundMe, and even direct speaking fees that Umar allegedly never reported. Investigators claim they can track every cent, and that nearly $2 million vanished without explanation. And instead of owning up, Dr. Umar Johnson allegedly doubled down when his accounts froze. He didn't stop asking. He went online begging people to send him money through Apple Pay and PayPal, claiming he was broke for the first time in his life. That moment, caught on livestream, wasn't just desperation, it was a crack in his armor. The so-called prince, the untouchable leader, suddenly looked shaken, small. Like a man who knew the jig was finally up. And the culture noticed. Former allies like Tariq Nasheed distanced themselves. Critics like Charleston White pointed out that Umar's pattern was obvious from day one. Endless talking, endless begging, but no results. And then came Tasha K, who took things further by dropping receipts on her platform, exposing irregularities in filings, missed tax reports, and donations that never matched official numbers. Each new revelation didn't just bruise Umar's image, it tore down the last defense he had. Credibility, because once the receipts hit the internet, the hashtags wrote themselves: scammer, fraud, Umar exposed. Even worse, it wasn't just critics tearing him apart. His own daughter went online, saying he had never been present in her life, never showed up to a graduation or birthday. Yet he preached daily about Black fathers being there for their children. That contradiction hit harder than any indictment, because it revealed the hypocrisy behind the image. And when Spiderlock reacted to all of this, he made it plain this wasn't just about a man in trouble. This was about the entire community that fell for the dream, only to watch it turn into a nightmare. Now the question isn't whether Dr. Umar Johnson can deliver his school. The question is whether he can deliver himself out of a federal prison. Reports suggest the charges include wire fraud, tax evasion, and even racketeering. The type of crimes that don't just carry fines, they carry decades. His empire is already crumbling, his accounts are locked, and the once loyal supporters are walking away in silence. What's left is a man cornered by his own contradictions, still talking, still spinning, but with nowhere left to run. And yet, the story isn't over. Because while the feds may have the receipts, while the media may have the clips, there are still those who believe this is bigger than just a scam. Some whisper it's a setup, That the government is silencing a voice too powerful, too raw, too unapologetic. Is that true? Or is it just another excuse to mask years of lies? One thing is certain, the walls are closing in. And Dr. Umar Johnson can't livestream his way out this time. The only thing left now is to wait, and the cliffhanger hanging over every supporter's head is simple. Will a so-called prince of Pan-Africanism become the prisoner of federal fraud? Or will he somehow pull off the biggest escape of his life? Stay tuned, because the receipts don't lie. And the next chapter may finally be his last. The story only grew darker once the cameras caught Dr. Umar Johnson on Instagram Live, visibly unraveling. Gone was the confident, fiery speaker who used to electrify stages with his booming sermons about Pan-African unity. In his place stood a man begging through a cracked phone screen, muttering about frozen accounts, pleading for supporters to send a few dollars to his Apple Pay and PayPal just so he could survive. For the first time, the so-called prince of Pan-Africanism admitted he was broke, and the irony? He was saying this while the feds accused him of pocketing nearly $2 million in donations. The live stream that was supposed to prove his innocence only confirmed what prosecutors claimed, a leader who had run out of excuses. The clip spread like wildfire. People replayed his trembling voice, his desperate eyes darting as he insisted the system was trying to silence him. But when Spider Lock reacted, he cut right through the theatrics. You mean to tell me, Spider said bluntly, that after 15 years of begging for money, the only thing you got to show is a locked-up account and a live stream? His words stung because they were true. The internet agreed. If this was leadership, it was built on sand. And then came the hammer blow. Tasha K, already infamous for exposing celebrities, dropped a video with detailed receipts. She revealed filings under the name Jermaine she make Umar's legal identity that show glaring irregularities. According to her breakdown, official forms listed only around $321.00 in contributions across 5 years, yet evidence from PayPal, GoFundMe, Cash App, and speaking fees suggested donations closer to $1.6 million to $2 million. Where did the rest go? The feds claim it funded personal expenses, hotels, travel, even a rumored $500 lunch date scheme where supporters paid just to dine with him. For the prosecutors, it was the missing piece. For the community, it was betrayal carved into stone. But it didn't stop there. Former allies turned into public enemies. Tariq Nasheed, once a supporter who even donated to the school project, admitted in interviews that he had lost faith years ago. He explained how every excuse, vandalism, frozen accounts, auction blocks started to sound like stalling tactics if the school was ever going to open. Tariq said it would have been open already. His words were damning, not just because of his influence, but because he once stood by Umar's side. Now he joined the growing chorus saying the dream was nothing but a hustle. Charleston White went further, accusing Umar of manipulating black women for donations through emotional blackmail. He argued that Umar played the role of protector, pandering to women's hopes, while in reality he drained their pockets. The fact that Umar often positioned himself as a savior of black women and children made Charleston's critique sting even harder. Suddenly, the very community Umar claimed to defend felt like his biggest victims died. And then the most painful revelation came not from critics or bloggers, but from within his own bloodline. A young woman identifying herself as Umar's daughter released a video confessing her disappointment. She explained that her father had never been present in her life, not at birthdays, not at graduations, not even in private moments of need. And yet here he was on social media, lecturing men about being strong fathers. The hypocrisy was unbearable. You can't preach about protecting black women, she said, when you can't even protect your own daughter. That testimony broke something deeper than any financial scandal ever could. It stripped Umar of his last defense, the image of being a role model. Meanwhile, federal prosecutors tightened their grip. Documents leaked showing that GoFundMe had already suspended multiple campaigns tied to Umar, as far back as 2014 and 2015, citing misuse of funds. Combined with the PayPal trail and IRS filings, investigators built a timeline of what they call a decade-long fraud operation. And now the once promised Frederick Douglass Marcus Garvey Academy sits abandoned, on the verge of being auctioned off. The school that was supposed to be his legacy may now become the ultimate evidence of his downfall. And what did Dr. Umar Johnson do in response? He played his greatest card one last time: victimhood. He went live again, railing against systemic oppression, claiming he was being targeted because he dared to stand up for his people. He argued the same government that allowed men like R. Kelly to thrive for decades was now persecuting him for trying to educate black children. But this time, the confidence was gone. Observers noticed how his hands shook, how his voice cracked, how the once fiery preacher now sounded like a man grasping at straws. Even his loyal supporters couldn't ignore the fear in his eyes, and yet, the spectacle only grew. Critics like Spider Lock reminded viewers that federal charges aren't like YouTube beefs. They don't go away with a clever clapback. This wasn't a blog war. This was RICO, tax fraud and wire fraud, crimes that carry real decades in prison. Every live stream, every plea, every excuse only fed the narrative that Umar wasn't a leader under attack. He was a hustler cornered by the truth. But here's the twist, some still defend him. They claim the timing of the charges, the freezing of accounts. Even the leaks to bloggers like Tasha K are part of a bigger setup. They argue the government doesn't want independent black schools, doesn't want voices challenging systemic oppression, and that Umar's downfall is less about fraud and more about silencing dissent. It's a theory that keeps his last supporters hanging on, clinging to the hope that their donations weren't wasted, but weaponized against him. Still, the evidence stacks higher. IRS forms, PayPal trails, suspended campaigns, even testimonies from former insiders all point in one direction. The school was never real. The dream was never meant to be built. And as his accounts remain frozen, as his critics pile on, as his allies walk away, Dr. Umar Johnson faces a one stage he can't control, a federal courtroom. And that is where the story hangs now in suspense. Will the so-called prince of Pan-Africanism be remembered as a visionary betrayed by the system, or as the biggest scammer in recent history? Will a school ever ring its bells, or will those halls remain empty monuments to broken promises? One thing is certain, his fate is no longer in his hands. It's in the hands of judges, prosecutors, and the very receipts he once used to fuel his sermons. So as the culture debates, as Spider Lock and Tasha K and Tariq Nasheed all weigh in, the image of Dr. Umar Johnson collapses piece by piece. His empire is crumbling, his supporters are fleeing, and his own family has spoken out. The next time we see him, it may not be behind a podium. It may be behind bars. And when that day comes, the only thing left to ask is simple: was it all a dream? Or was it always a lie? Always a lie.